It was my sister Madison's wedding day at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan. The neo-Gothic masterpiece stood proudly on Fifth Avenue, its spires reaching toward the September sky. I, Olivia, was there as maid of honor, wearing a dusty rose dress that Madison had chosen to match the peonies and roses decorating the cathedral. Ryan, the groom, adjusted his navy tie nervously at the altar, while 400 guests from Manhattan's Upper East Side and Greenwich, Connecticut, filled the carved wooden pews. The morning had started at the Plaza Hotel, overlooking Central Park. Madison looked stunning in her Vera Wang gown, with delicate beading, while the hairstylist arranged her honey blonde waves, weaving in tiny white orchids. I tried to suppress the dread that had been eating me alive from the inside. 3 weeks earlier, I discovered something about Ryan that would destroy my 31-year-old sister. That secret was literally suffocating me every single day. Our mother, Patricia, paced the suite, checking every detail with her wedding planner. "Your grandmother Charlotte would be so proud," she kept saying, touching the Tiffany diamond necklace that had been in our family since the 1920s. My father, William, a hedge fund manager with offices on Wall Street, was on the terrace taking calls, something he only did when extremely anxious about non-business matters. The procession began with Pachelbel's canon, played by the cathedral's organ. I walked slowly behind the other bridesmaids, my hands trembling as I held the bouquet of white peonies and eucalyptus. The scent of incense and old wood filled the cathedral. Ryan's parents, a prominent Boston family who owned several biotech companies, sat in the front row. His mother wore a champagne Chanel suit with pearls that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. When Madison entered on our father's arm, everyone rose. She was breathtaking, the cathedral's stained glass windows casting rainbow light across her dress. The antique lace veil that had belonged to our great-grandmother from Charleston framed her glowing face. Ryan watched her with what appeared to be pure devotion, but I knew the truth. My stomach churned as I took my position beside the altar, the cold marble floor seeping through my Jimmy Choos. Father O'Brien began the ceremony in his Irish-accented voice. His words about eternal love and sacred bonds echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Each word felt like a dagger to my heart. I watched Ryan holding Madison's hands, his Harvard MBA and position at his family's firm, making him the perfect catch in everyone's eyes. But I knew what those manicured hands had been doing just days ago. 3 weeks prior, I'd been leaving my shift at Mount Sinai Hospital, where I worked as a pediatric nurse. It was past midnight when I saw Ryan's black Tesla parked outside a brownstone in Tribeca. Not Madison's apartment. She lived on the Upper West Side. Curious and concerned, I waited. When he emerged at 3 a.m. with Jessica, his ex-fiancée from Harvard Business School, my blood ran cold. The way he kissed her goodbye wasn't platonic. I'd followed him twice more after that, hating myself for spying, but needing to be certain. The second time, I saw them at a restaurant in Brooklyn Heights, hidden in a corner booth, their hands intertwined over glasses of wine. Jessica, with her sleek black hair and designer clothes, looked every inch the successful investment banker she'd become. I'd taken photos with my phone, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. The third encounter, just 5 days before the wedding, had been the worst. I'd overheard Ryan on a call in the Rainbow Room, where we were finalizing wedding details. He thought he was alone on the terrace. "Jessica, baby, just wait until after the honeymoon in Bora Bora. Madison's father has the connections I need for the Hong Kong expansion. Once that's secured, we can be together properly. I'll give it maybe a year, 18 months tops." Now standing in this holy place, watching my sister about to bind herself to this bastard, I felt physically sick. Father O'Brien reached the crucial moment. If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The silence was deafening. 400 people held their breath. This was typically just a formality, but my mouth opened before my brain could stop it. "Stop!" My voice cracked through the sacred silence. Every head turned toward me in shock. Madison's bouquet trembled in her hands, white petals scattering onto the marble floor. "Olivia, what the hell are you doing?" she whispered, her face draining of color. "I can't let you do this," I said, my voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to fall. "Ryan's been cheating with Jessica. They're still together. I have proof. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The cathedral erupted. Ryan's mother stood abruptly, her pearls clicking. This is absolutely outrageous. How dare you make such accusations? Do you know who we are? His father's face turned crimson. Young lady, you'll be hearing from our lawyers. Madison's bouquet fell completely now. Flowers scattered across the ancient stones. You're ruining everything, she screamed, tears beginning to destroy her perfect makeup. You've always been jealous, always. You can't stand to see me happy because you're miserable and alone after your divorce. Her words stung, but I pressed on. Maddie, please, look at the photos. Listen to me. Last Tuesday, when he said he was at that conference in Boston, he was with Jessica at her place in Tribeca. I saw them. I heard him saying your marriage would last 18 months at most, that he just needs Dad's connections for Hong Kong. Ryan finally spoke, his Boston Brahmin accent sharp despite obvious panic. Madison, darling, this is all a misunderstanding. Olivia's obviously mistaken. That was a business meeting with Jessica, nothing more. But his face had gone ashen, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cathedral's air conditioning. A business meeting at 3 a.m? I challenged. A business meeting where you told her you loved her? Where you said my sister was just a stepping stone? I showed Madison the photos on my phone, watched her face crumble as she saw the evidence. Is it true? Madison's voice was barely a whisper as she turned to Ryan. Tell me she's lying. Please tell me this isn't true. The congregation watched in stunned silence, many recording on their phones despite the setting. This would be all over page 6 tomorrow. Ryan's silence spoke volumes. He loosened his tie, ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Madison, it's complicated. Jessica and I have history, but I do care for you. Care for me? Madison's voice rose to a shriek. Care for me? You were going to marry me while planning to leave me for her? She ripped off her veil, threw it at his feet. The antique lace landed in a crumpled heap. 3 days ago, Ryan. 3 days ago, you were with her while I was at my final dress fitting. Our cousin Jennifer stood up from her pew. Madison, perhaps we should discuss this privately. But Madison was beyond consolation. She turned to the congregation, her tear-stained face defiant. The wedding is off, but the reception's paid for at the Pierre, so please, go enjoy the $150 a plate dinner. God knows it cost enough. She started walking toward the exit, her train dragging behind her like a wounded animal. I moved to follow, but 2 ushers stepped forward. Miss, we need to ask you to leave, one said firmly. They were Ryan's fraternity brothers from Harvard, all muscle and no sympathy. As they escorted me out, I heard rapid footsteps behind us. Wait, Ryan called out. The ushers paused, confused. Ryan caught up, his tux disheveled, his boutonniere hanging at an angle. Olivia, we need to talk. We emerged into the bright Manhattan afternoon. The sounds of traffic and tourists filled Fifth Avenue. Yellow cabs honked, completely oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. Ryan looked desperate, older than his 34 years. Why? He asked simply. Why couldn't you have just let it be? I would have made her happy enough. She would have had the life she wanted, the house in Westchester, the kids at Dalton, the country club membership. Happy enough? I repeated incredulously. She deserves more than enough, Ryan. She deserves someone who loves her completely, not someone using her as a stepping stone to Hong Kong. The sun was beating down, making my dress stick to my skin. You don't understand, Ryan said, running his hands through his hair. Jessica and I, it's complicated. Our families have been planning our merger since we were at prep school. When she broke it off to take the job at Goldman Sachs in London, I was devastated. Madison, she helped me forget. So Madison was just a rebound? I asked, disgusted. A band-aid for your wounded ego? Ryan shook his head miserably. No, I do love Madison. Just not the way I love Jessica. Jessica's transferring back to New York. She got offered a position at Blackstone. We were going to wait, do things properly after you'd used my sister and my father's connections. I finished for him. You're pathetic, Ryan, truly pathetic. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. Your family will never forgive you for this, he said. You've humiliated them in front of New York society. Your mother's charity board, your father's business partners, everyone was there. You've made enemies of some of the most powerful families on the East Coast. Do you have any idea what you've done? I yanked my arm free. I've saved my sister from a lifetime of lies. That's what I've done. I walked away, leaving him standing in the sun in his designer tux, a groom without a bride. I found Madison in Central Park, sitting on a bench near Bethesda Fountain. Her wedding dress was ruined, grass stains on the hem, her carefully styled hair now wind-blown and messy. She looked up when she heard me approach, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "Grandma Charlotte always said you were the brave one," she said quietly. I sat beside her, not caring about the dirty bench staining my bridesmaid dress. "I'm sorry for what I said in there, about you being jealous and alone after David. That was cruel." "You were in shock," I said. "I understand." We sat in silence, watching tourists take photos by the fountain. A street performer played New York, New York on his saxophone, completely unaware of our drama. "You know what the worst part is?" Madison said eventually. "I suspected something. Little things, like how he'd tense up when Jessica's name was mentioned, or how he'd guard his phone. But I wanted the fairy tale so badly that I ignored it all." A group of Chinese tourists walked past, taking selfies with the Angel of the Water statue, oblivious to the two women in formal wear sitting on a bench. One of them photographed us, probably thinking we were some kind of performance art. That evening we ended up at our favorite dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, still in our ruined dresses. Tommy, the bartender who'd known us since we snuck in with fake IDs in college, poured us whiskey without asking. "Heard about the cathedral," he said simply. "It's already all over Instagram. You're trending on Twitter." By our third drink, Madison was laughing through her tears. Can you imagine Ryan's mother's face? I thought her Botox was going to crack from the shock. We giggled helplessly, the whiskey and emotional exhaustion making everything seem absurdly funny. "At least the food won't go to waste," Madison said. "I heard Uncle George took 3 plates and wrapped up cake in napkins for later, and Aunt Linda stuffed the centerpieces in her Louis Vuitton." We dissolved into laughter again, earning looks from the other patrons. Our brother Christopher drove down from Boston around midnight, having left as soon as he heard. "You okay, Maddie?" he asked, wrapping her in a bear hug. Then he turned to me. "And you, Liv, that took guts. Mom's having a complete meltdown, but Dad said he's proud of you, said you did what he didn't have the courage to do." The next week was brutal. Ryan's family threatened legal action for humiliation and defamation. Jessica actually had the audacity to call Madison to apologize, claiming she never meant for things to go so far. Madison hung up on her mid-sentence. Manhattan society buzzed with gossip, everyone taking sides. The story even made it into the New York Post. Cathedral catastrophe, maid of honor, stops society wedding. But support came from unexpected places. Mrs. Weinstein, our old piano teacher from Juilliard pre-college, sent a card saying, "Truth is always better than a beautiful lie." The florist refused payment, saying she'd been cheated on herself and understood. Even Ryan's own aunt from San Francisco, estranged from the family for years, called to say she wasn't surprised, that Ryan had always been a entitled little shit, just like his father. 3 months later, Madison received a letter from Jessica. We read it together over coffee in my apartment overlooking the Hudson. Jessica explained how Ryan had pursued her relentlessly, how he'd convinced her that Madison knew and accepted the situation, that theirs was a marriage of convenience. She'd discovered the truth only after the wedding fiasco and had immediately ended things with Ryan. She was transferring back to London, wanting nothing more to do with him. "The bastard lied to everyone," Madison said, crumpling the letter. "Even Jessica. He created this whole web of deception." She stood and walked to the window, watching boats on the Hudson. "You know what? I'm glad it happened. Better to find out before than after." 6 months later, at a medical conference in Seattle, I introduced Madison to my colleague Jake, a cardiac surgeon from Portland with a wicked sense of humor and absolutely no connections to East Coast society. He was refreshingly straightforward, the type who said what he meant and meant what he said. Their first date lasted 20 hours. They talked until the sun came up over Puget Sound. A year later, I was Madison's maid of honor again, this time at a small ceremony in Napa Valley. Only 50 guests, no Society Pages photographers, no pretense. Jake's vows made everyone cry when he said, "I promise to love you honestly, completely, and without reservation. No secrets, No lies, just truth and terrible dad jokes for the rest of our lives. During my speech at the reception in a vineyard overlooking the valley, I said, "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak the truth, even when our voice shakes, even when the whole world is watching." Madison found her real fairy tale not in spite of what happened at St. Patrick's, but because of it, because she deserved someone who chose her first, not as a consolation prize. Ryan, we heard through the Manhattan grapevine, moved to Hong Kong alone. His position there lasted 6 months before he was let go for financial irregularities. Apparently, he'd been falsifying expense reports. His father had to pull major strings to keep it out of the Wall Street Journal. Jessica married a British diplomat and had twins. She sent Madison a congratulations card when Jake and Madison had their first child, a gesture of closure that Madison appreciated. 2 years after the cathedral incident, Madison and I stood again at our grandmother's grave in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, this time bringing flowers for her birthday. Madison carried her baby daughter, Charlotte, named after Grandma. "Remember when we sat on that bench in Central Park, me in that ridiculous ruined dress?" Madison asked. "You looked like a runaway bride from a rom-com gone wrong," I laughed. Tommy probably still tells that story to tourists. Madison adjusted her daughter's tiny sun hat against the New York wind. "I never thanked you properly, Liv. Not really. You risked everything, family, reputation, even my love, to save me from a terrible mistake. You would have done the same for me," I said simply. But Madison shook her head. "I don't know if I would have been brave enough. Standing up in that cathedral, in front of all those people, knowing you'd be escorted out, knowing Mom would be mortified, knowing the most powerful families would try to destroy us. That took real courage." As we walked back through the cemetery gates, Madison stopped and turned to me. "You know what Grandma Charlotte would have said? A lie has speed, but truth has endurance. You gave me endurance, Olivia. You gave me a truth I could build a real life on." Looking back now, that moment in St. Patrick's Cathedral feels like something from another lifetime. The security escorting me out, Ryan chasing after me in his tux, the Manhattan sun beating down as we argued on Fifth Avenue. It all seems surreal. But every decision made that day led us here. Madison genuinely happy with a man who adores her. Me knowing I did right by my sister. And even Ryan, hopefully, learning that you can't build happiness on deception. The truth that day was devastating. It destroyed what seemed perfect and scandalized New York society. But from those ashes grew something authentic, something stronger, something real. Because in the end, that's what we all deserve. Love built on truth, not illusions. Love that doesn't need secrets to survive. Love that can face reality and choose to stay. That evening at Charlotte's christening, held at a small church in Carmel by the Sea with no fanfare or society photographers, Madison pulled me aside. "Remember you asked me once if I'd have been happy not knowing? Living in ignorance?" I nodded. "I would have found out eventually," she said. "The truth always comes out. But by then, I might have had children with him, been financially dependent, been trapped. You didn't just save me from a bad marriage, Olivia. You saved me from a life built on lies." As I watched her return to Jake, who was making their daughter laugh with silly faces, I knew she was right. Sometimes the greatest act of love is telling the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Because truth, unlike lies, gives us the power to choose our own path. And that's the greatest gift anyone can give.